Morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. This is a G2M webinar for PlyOps and Phoenix Nap. This is empowering real-time app interactions for modern business applications. Before we go through, start the webinar, I'll just go through some quick ground rules. You can kind of see here, we're going to have a Q&A session. That'll be at the end of the webinar. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So we will be recording this webinar. We'll send a link to the recording and a PDF of the slides to everybody who has registered for the webinar. You should get that hopefully no more than the end of the day tomorrow, Friday, or early on Monday. Number two, you're strongly encouraged to ask questions. So we have the Zoom Q&A feature. Please use that to submit your questions, and we'll go through all the questions, time permitting, at the end of the session. Finally, we'll have 3 different audience surveys during the webinar. These answers that you put in for these are anonymous, so please feel free to answer them. We'll use the Zoom survey tool, so you'll see a little window pop up that has the question and the answers, and we'll give everybody about 2 minutes for each one to answer while we go on with the webinar. So with that, let me do some quick introductions here. Let me skip one slide ahead and then I'll jump into the other part. So my name is Mike Heumann. I'm the principal analyst for data center at G2M Research. With me is Tony Oshari. Tony is the vice president of products and marketing at PlyOps. And also with us is William Bell. He's EVP of products at Phoenix Nap. Looking forward to having a great discussion with everybody. So let me talk a little bit about what it means to have real-time interactions in business apps. I think most of us in the B2B world think of, okay, I look up, whatever our inventory position or what does my budget look like? If it's off by a minute or two, it's not a big deal. But if you think about in the B2C world, especially, and even more so in the B2B world, it's become a real issue. Think about, for instance, let's say you go on to Steam, the gaming site, you buy a game. Your expectation is that game should be able to be started immediately, right? Same on Netflix. If you buy an event or you buy something else or Amazon Prime Video, whatever it is, you expect to be able to access that content right away. And many companies are getting to that. They get that. Especially companies that are heavily into streaming, they really have seen that's being important. But it's coming in more and more things. If I deposit a check, from a mobile app in a bank, I want to see that pop up in my balance, right away. You can think of other things. Retail. If I buy something, I want to see that that's in my cart, and I want to see that order's been placed. What happens if you don't do that? If you're using a high latency, and high latency in this case might be 3 or 4 minutes or even less, people get very dissatisfied because they don't see your platform as being reliable. That's what they kind of compare it to or tie it to. And so those things become really important. And what you're seeing is that a lot of companies are putting a lot of energy into making their business systems be real time, essentially. You press a button, the results show up real time. In fact, IDC forecasts that 30% of all business apps will have to be real time by 2025. And, it could be more than that. You can see here on the graphic to the right, where you've got companies that are best in class. Most of them are data streaming companies, right? You see ones that are far behind, right? And these guys are going to really suffer. They're not going to see the growth that one expects. I can tell you my personal experience. I just moved into a new house and getting new cell phones because the coverage wasn't good with our previous provider, who I loved, but so it wasn't that. And it took forever getting their system to respond. And you'd think for a telecom company they do better than that. So I'm not going to say their name, but let's say it certainly gave me, if the company I used to have came back and covered my area, I probably switched them. So, for companies like Phoenix Nap, who provide business services to other companies, IT services, obviously having real time is very important. So both Tony and William will talk a little bit about that. So let me hand it over to Tony Give me 1 second, Tony, and I'll give you remote control. All right, you should be good to go.
All right, great. Great to be with you guys, with you, Mike, William. It's a pleasure to be doing business with PhoenixNAP, of course. So you heard Mike talk about some realities out there about the need for faster analysis and real-time nature of the data. You hear that just about anywhere. Before the call started today, the webinar, we were talking about how just about everybody in their reports or webinars, etc., is talking about importance of making fast analytics, but a good amount of that data is fed into, of course, AI, ML machines, and more and more you see some of that taking place. But there's no question that there's a surge in growth of data set sizes. A lot of that is, again, based on the reality of our world nowadays and how interactive we are with each other, how interactive we are with fast videos. You see an example of a customer that we'll show you later that he is the number one quick video vendor in the world. But all of this means that this low latency requirement requires real-time responses. And out of that, really, we need better insights. So people's businesses depend on that. You heard the example that Mike brought up. If you fall behind the competitor, you're out. The more you can make sense of data in your domain, the more successful you are. And then all of this really needs to be around simpler, more cost-effective solutions, supporting more data faster. And a user is not going to hang around if the latency is too long for them. They go away, they go to a different site, you left a bad impression. You have to do all this while you also have to build better data centers, better infrastructure. You have to worry about your budgets, and you have to worry about your operational costs. And ultimately, people are also thinking that they have environmental and green responsibilities. So all of this are things that are today's realities. What did we announce this week? We love Redis, by the way. Redis, even Redis Enterprise. What we announced today is a cluster available at PhoenixNAP based on Redis, but this takes the goodness of Redis and delivers even better Redis, essentially. We're making this technology, we are enabling this through the core capability of our product of PlyOps IP, and that's around how we manage keys and values the most optimal way and place them in storage, in this case SSDs. The umbrella product for that is XDP XL-KV, and specifically this API that we're using for Redis is XDP Rocks, which is a de facto replacement for the RocksDB that is natively used in Redis. This solution that we have announced is a cost-effective offering that optimizes performance and economics of Redis and delivers significant performance, latency, and capacity benefits. And of course, this is now available as a no-cost test drive with PhoenixNAP. Our goal here is to make sure that we expand the footprint and outreach of our solution to customers out there that want to bring their workload and give it a try on this Redis cluster instead of either at somebody else's offering. Could be even if you're running things on Azure or on AWS, you can bring your workload and give it a try here. If you're running it in-house, you can give it a try. We're also looking at people that are in this business, so IT operators and or people that are in the business of service or providing services, now they can they can build that infrastructure essentially at PhoenixNAP and offer those services for many customers. Why PlyOps and PhoenixNAP Redis? Well, it is 4x higher provision capacity compared with leading cloud providers. We continuously monitor what solutions AWS and GPS and Azure offer. And if you look at the capacity of SSDs for Redis, the cluster that we're offering for a test drive is 4x denser, high throughput and latency reduction across various size objects. Again, because of the offload and hardware acceleration capability of our solution versus trying to do things in hardware, we take no hit depending on variance and variability of data. Everything with storage is very consistent. The number of threads don't impact it. All of that is benefits that you get with running Redis on XDP at PhoenixNAP. Reduction of total cost of ownership. We'll walk you through some of those examples. And benefits of Redis Enterprise. Of course, this is still Redis Enterprise. This is all the goodness that comes from Redis Enterprise, but the agility of cloud deployment and scaling that PhoenixNAP brings in, and mitigation of Redis cluster sprawl and data center power and cooling. Again, a great benefit of bringing the infrastructure to PhoenixNAP, taking full advantage of Redis, but not even a better Redis with Redis on XDP, and not having to worry about managing that in your own on-prem solution. We talked about real-time insights. Well, Redis is Redis. Redis is great. It does many great things. It's primarily used as caching, and the way it does that is it uses DRAM primarily for that. As you guys know, there's limitations with that. It has to do with cost. It has to do with capacity. There's only so much you can fit in a server. You'll see some examples of that. Well, if you can expand that footprint and not have to worry about and change anything, and all of a sudden you can fit a lot more data in your domain, whether it's you're running real-time analytics, for streaming data, for metering and traffic shaping, for gaming, for personalization, leaderboards, fraud detection, etc. The bigger the data you can fit into this machine, the better. You can do that by building clusters of Redis machines and, essentially making bigger and bigger, but there's a cost associated with that. If you can move some of this to DRAM and to flash, and still get the SLAs and the numbers that you need to hit, yet not have to worry about the performance of SSDs, not have to worry about drive failures, not have to worry about all the things that you normally would have to deal with SSDs. Well, that's a great solution. What does this mean at the end of the day is you can do a lot more work with combination of caching, in-memory caching, and the extension of that into flash. In particular, for example, Redis has a solution called Redis Data Integration. It allows you to just have these seamless connections to SQL databases, Oracle, MySQL, SQL Server, etc. And not only improve Postgres, for example, not only improve some of that caching experience, but also be able to analyze more and more data. So what we are providing here to make that Redis Data Integration RDI service even better. And what does this mean at the end of the day? This gives you the multi-year business insights so that everybody's striving for. Not only solve the immediate caching issue, but also have much more data to make better insights based on those use cases that we talked about. So how does this work? Well, a little bit about the fundamentals of the solution itself. So on the left, you have Redis, standard Redis, Redis Enterprise. It's obviously very, very good for performance, very, very good for latency, but it's limited when it comes to large data sets. And then, yes, if you want to put everything in DRAM, then ultimately there's a TCO hit for you. So Redis already offers a great solution called Redis on Flash. But with that, you still have the latency and performance hits. You do address the large data sets. You can fit more large data sets. Obviously, you have more TCO savings, but there is ultimately some performance and latency concerns with Redis on Flash. But more importantly, you still have the wear and tear of the drives and drive replacements and all that stuff that you normally have with Flash. Well, fundamentally, in what Redis on Flash does, it uses a solution called RocksDB to manage the objects on storage, on DRAM, on Flash. RocksDB natively has some issues with space amplifications. It essentially causes too many writes to the drive. So all of those are still preventing people from a broader usage of Flash for Redis. Well, we solve all of that problems with our RocksDB solution. We call it XDP Rocks, which is a combination of offload to our hardware and the PlyOps acceleration card that is inside the PhoenixNAP servers, but also the software techniques that we've applied in RocksDB itself. So a combination of those allows us to maintain very close performance, and you'll see it in the coming slides. Very, very good latency, but also supporting very large data sets and having all of this translate to great TCO savings. Let's see an example of how this works. So this actually is exactly a snapshot of how a customer was testing in a leading short video vendor in the world testing. And we took some micro benchmarks here. So on the left is basically all reads, and on the right is 50-50 read and write. So that's how you should read it. You can see that with standard RocksDB, the knee hits somewhere that, south of 500,000 IOPS. And what does this mean? Well, customers have, out of this server, for example, out of this infrastructure, customers have a certain expectations of SLA. So for example, in this case, they can't afford for latencies, especially the 4 nines, to be anywhere greater than 10 milliseconds. So in a 10 millisecond window where I'm pointing my arrow, I can only push something less than 500,000. When we deploy XDP Rocks and XDP in a solution, that number goes way, way up, north of 2 million IOPS. Same thing in a mixed read writes. Now, in a system that is constant, in a world that is constantly reads, you're looking at the left picture. But writes can be very, very costly, even though they're very infrequent. So in a mixed read-write scenario, which is still a very important case for some of these customers, you still see a big hit as well. So the numbers are even lower. So in this case, in 10 millisecond range, maybe even less than 100,000 IOPS. With PlyOps, that goes up to 600,000 IOPS. So if I just look at the X factor here, we get about a 7x improvement going from without PlyOps to a solution that is powered up by PlyOps, and even taking less CPU cycles, and a 25x improvement in latency in a mixed workload. So what does all of this mean? Well, if you have a big data set, let's say, let's say you have about a 7 terabyte mixed work of data set, it requires about 10 servers to keep everything in DRAM. If you can fit everything in a single server and still be able to digest and run analytics on that 7 terabyte worth of data, well, you get from a 10 server to a 1 server ratio. So the server costs, and these are arbitrarily, this, it's just a ratio that counts, went from $45K to $7 per gigabyte, went significantly down from $7.39 to $1.16. IOPS per server remained very, very close, even though we introduced a significant amount of flash. And the way that works is not everything needs to be served with out of flash. A good amount of data can still, hot versus warm, still stays in DRAM. And latency, again, very, very compatible with a full DRAM solution. So, by the way this is approached is there's people want to either just do pure cost reduction. In other words, they're looking at a data center macro level solution, or they want to get more performance and scale for capacity at lower cost. That's more of a macro level, application level. These are not really competing solutions, and we shouldn't think of them as in balance in the system. The way this architecture works with XDP is we can address both. And so on the left, the goal is actually to reduce the footprint. So it's and the benefits there is the data center consolidation, server consolidation, overall TCO reductions, overall power savings. On the right is to do more with the same infrastructure. So again, depending on how budgets work, what the availability of servers, all of that is, the mileage will vary. Sometimes you have the budget to buy the servers, but you can't get them because of leads and shortages, etc. On the right, if you can do more with the same infrastructure, you get high capacity, reduce the dollar per terabyte. You have high performance, which is reduced dollar per IOPS, user scalability, and multi-tenancy, which means reduced dollars per user. What we are doing with PhoenixNAP starts with Redis. Our goal is to generate a lot of interest around Redis with this cluster, but really fundamentally the solution applies to other databases as well. So down the road, you hear us at some collaborative work that we're going to do with PhoenixNAP around Mongo, for example, around Kafka, around Spark. Some of the fundamental building blocks that we're doing here with Redis applies to other solutions as well. And that's what I just wanted to make a quick reference to this. Redis today is the Redis enterprise model. That's what we have deployed on the servers at PhoenixNAP. There's an open source version as well. There are some customers out there that are doing their own version of Redis. In China, there's a popular one called KVROX, which is fundamentally is the same. So the point of this is that we're doing different, we will apply this to different kinds of applications and introduce them over time. All right, William. I think I need to give you control. So
yeah, thanks. All right, everybody. I mean, as Tony mentioned, there's a lot of compelling reasons why PlyOps fundamentally changes the experience for users of Redis and many other applications. But that's kind of what we've covered today. What we have been working on is addressing the accessibility of great products like this, making sure that organizations can quickly, agilely deploy this type of infrastructure in a dedicated metal instance consumption model with cloudified billing options, right? Hourly, monthly, multi-year contract, whatever makes sense for your business. And what we're introducing is a new instance type that is available on demand that will give users, specifically addressing Redis right now, the right build specification to accommodate both the capacity that they would need to run a larger, more feature-rich application or use case of Redis, but without those trade-offs, without having to say, okay, I have to spend 6-7x to accomplish this same mission. And what we're doing is we're delivering that in a platform engineering SRE type of experience so that organizations can leverage Terraform, Ansible, whatever makes sense for your infrastructure deployment capabilities to bring up that instance in an instantaneous fashion, leverage it for the application that you're trying to run, whether that's a dev test or production, and then discard it back to us whenever you're done, right? And in a case like this, your only alternative today in the market is to go buy a server to run this specific workload, put it in a data center, acquire colo infrastructure or use space that you already have. And PlyOps has some great partners on the OEM side. But especially early on in this decision-making path, right? It's much easier just to go grab one of these instances, make sure that all the things that Tony said make sense to your organization and your application or your use case of Redis. And then make a decision after that. Make a decision about where that workload needs to stay, what that TCO looks like, and bringing this together in a cost-effective fashion. Tony, did we figure out the...
I'm going to just advance them for you.
Go for it. Let's do it. No problem. So about 3.5 years ago, we debuted a fairly revolutionary cloud computing construct and true alternative to public cloud infrastructure as a service. This is not PaaS. This is not a collection of APIs and managed services for organizations to take advantage of. This is a collection of data center infrastructure features and products that allows an organization to instantaneously have data center operations in a region that they previously didn't have before. And you can take your application, your kind of workflows for application deployment, continuous integration, continuous delivery, or infrastructure on-demand deployment, and provision the infrastructure that you need for that application, optionally connect it to public cloud resources and public cloud infrastructure so that you can have that kind of more controlled, security-controlled experience, right? Without having to fundamentally change your operations and workflow. But don't give up all of the things that I think the things that people really expected to get out of public cloud infrastructure in the first place, which is access to technologies that would take them a long time to deploy, flexibility in the billing model, access to the newest technologies outside of a refresh cycle or something like that that has to be capitalized and budgeted, and instant gratification, right? Having that available in a very instantaneous fashion between 60 and 10 minutes or so, depending on the operating system and the type of instance that's being deployed, 60 seconds to 10 minutes. Next slide. And so what brings all this together is today the options for organizations running Redis in production at scale are very limited, right? The main two options are buy and build, buy servers, put tons of RAM in them, or buy servers with at least a lot of RAM, but maybe not max capacity, and then have a flash tier that allows Redis to leverage that flash component, but knowing that you're giving up performance, even though you're saving cost and you're gaining capacity, that's really the option you have. That's what's available on the market today. And between PlyOps and PhoenixNAP, or I guess you could go to the public cloud and do it there, which would cost you even more. But between PlyOps and PhoenixNAP, we've partnered together to make sure that this groundbreaking technology is available for instant deployment. You can go to bmc.phoenixnap.com. You can sign up now and you can try out this platform, right? I think that's a very compelling thing. You get all the things that Tony talked about around cost reduction, capacity increase, performance, at least performance parity, right? And you get a few extra goodies, right? Because PlyOps does so much more than just accelerate Redis, right? You get a very resilient storage layer that the PlyOps XDP card is managing, so that you get RAID 5 like protection for RAID 5, RAID 6 like protection for your data, but with out some of the penalties on the actual storage performance itself. And when something does go wrong, like you lose a drive, getting that rebuild done can actually happen in a functionally reasonable time period, which is something that's difficult, especially with RAID 5 today. And so I mean, I think that's where we see our mission in life is to bring the most cutting edge infrastructure technologies to consumers that need that desire to have cloudified infrastructure access and an alternative, less vendor lock-in version of public cloud infrastructure. What I think ultimately people believed and still believe to this day they're getting from the hyperscaler vendors out there, but what they quickly realize is a mostly walled garden of APIs and platforms that you're mostly forced to consume, right? With PlyOps and PhoenixNAP, there's none of that. There's no vendor lock-in. You can pick this application up and move it anywhere you want, 30 days, 100 days, 5 years later. And that level of freedom is difficult to find today in the, call it public cloud infrastructure landscape. And next slide. Aside from all the things that we do with PlyOps, right? We have a collection of infrastructure assets around 7 regions around the globe that allow customers to get an entire application set, right? Even if it is a single application, maybe Redis is just a component of that application, right? But we have different size instances, different operating system options, complex networking capabilities, all of which are delivered, as a API, a user interface, a Terraform integration, an Ansible integration, so that you can click and design or code and design your infrastructure to meet this kind of application need in its entirety, at a price point that is groundbreaking in terms of what you get for what you're paying for. Very often, what our customers are shocked to see is high performance, dedicated pieces of infrastructure that are a fraction of the cost of a virtual machine of similar size in any of the hyperscalers. And the number one question I get is like, how can you do that, right? AWS, Google, Microsoft, their buying power is so immense, you can't possibly be able to offer infrastructure in a more cost-effective way for consumption on demand. And it's funny to me, what I end up having to explain to our customers and prospects is like, this is exactly what they want you to believe. They have very intelligently built marketing information schemes, platforms that are kind of wrapped around pieces of infrastructure that, as you scale, become more expensive, and a very conscious loss leader, or call it pseudo loss leader strategy around small instance types that give users the belief that the infrastructure is very cheap or very inexpensive. And what they find as they go to production or they start to scale is that all of those things that they thought about the cost effectiveness of public cloud, especially if that application existed prior to public cloud in a data center or whatnot, are false. Now, there are things that are fantastic in the public cloud. Some of the things that these modern AI companies have been able to do would have been impossible if companies like Microsoft and AWS and Google didn't exist, right? But those are targeted use cases. Those are places that are always going to be better in a hyperscaler purely because of scale, right? But even those things, while they may be possible only there, are extremely expensive. If you had the capital to go do it yourself, right, and the wherewithal and the needs, it would be, the TCO would be much less, and they know it. And I think it's easy. It's an easy exercise. What I usually have people do is go look at what a .metal instance, any of them, M5 .metal, right, instance costs on a 3-year committed model. That's quote unquote maximum discount. On this, just go to Dell.com and like put in the button, press the buttons and build the same server. Yeah, you got to have colo. Yeah, you got to have this and networking and things like that. But every one of those servers will be, over a 3-year period will be 1/10 the cost, 1/9 the cost of buying it and putting it in a data center yourself. What we've done is we've said, you don't even have to do that. You don't even have to go build out data center operations. You can take that same type of cost-effective infrastructure and you can have it instantly. You don't get fancy APIs, you don't get fancy platforms, but you get the things, the building blocks that you need for your application, and you get access to specialized infrastructure like PlyOps that are not available in public clouds. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Tony and Michael, and they can wrap it up. Thank you everyone so much for joining.
Awesome. Well, certainly our announcement is all about allowing you guys, the users, to consider taking a test drive on PhoenixNAP. The easiest way to do that is to send us an email at demo@plyops.com, and we'll follow up and we'll make it happen for you guys to get on this cluster and test it. Really, just like William said, not limited to Redis. There's many other good things that we're doing with PhoenixNAP. Use the same email, and we'll certainly get you going. And then to learn more about this fundamental technology and underpinning capability, you can go to plyops.com/ExcelKV to learn more. Thank you. Mike?
Sure thing. Let me grab control here and go ahead and go into the question and answer session here. Let me get this going. So we'll do our first audience survey right now. And the question is, I'm going to launch it so you should see it pop up on your screen shortly, is what percentage of your business applications need real-time responsiveness? And you see five different choices there. I'll give you a couple minutes to answer that. And while you do that, we're going to go to the first panel question. And this is to William and Tony can jump in as well. So William, what led you to look for a solution to accelerate business applications such as Redis in this case? And what were kind of the goals of your engagement when you started this?
Well, go ahead, Tony. You start, and then I'll round it out.
Yeah, sure. So I think we're seeing this at a really, really large scale at big customers, right? Really big customers in the world that are seeing it, and we see how important solving this problem is for them. And our goal is to democratize this and bring it to the masses here in the US and in EMEA. And that's the reason we want to partner with PhoenixNav. We see this platform as one that will allow people the chance to try this for their own and see the benefits that we have experienced elsewhere. Now we're going to bring it for the rest of the world here on PhoenixNav. And it's all the goodness that we talked about with Redis, and Redis is great, but how is it that Redis on an infrastructure with XDP and PhoenixNav can be even greater? And that's really our goal here.
Yeah, and I think that for PhoenixNav, I think maybe answering the why PlyOps question, right? What attracted me to engaging with PlyOps is this, call it radical transformation capabilities that their technology possesses. That's what we feel like we're doing at PNAP today, is making the impossible possible, the things that people felt like they would never be able to accomplish in a public cloud because the TCO was broken, right? We're finding ways to help customers do that every single day. And PlyOps and other technologies like them are becoming critical to completing that picture for our customers.
Excellent. Let me jump to the next question here. So we'll go to audience survey 2, and that is, it should pop up on your screen right now. And the question is, what business values do real-time app interactions provide for your applications? And again, this is select all that apply. That should be showing up. Let's go to the second panel question. That is, William and Tony, what sort of learning experiences did you have during this, as far as, did you have to work with Redis to implement this, or there are things that you do differently when you started it, things like that?
We took our core IP and core capability, and we had a lot of this in mind when we formed the company. We knew the whole notion of the world moving into the more of a object-oriented things, and breaking the barriers to having this formation of block going to go away, just because of all the things that we talked about. When you need real-time analytics and real-time impressions, that's not a consistent 4K, 8K, 12K, 16K number that goes back and forth. The mileage varies, and the world as we see it is a world of data being more of that nature. And so with that in mind, that's really how we designed our IP. And then it was very easy to see the benefits to an application like Redis. And you see us come on down the road, talk more about Mongo as well. So it was very easy, and we quickly found out how software comes short and with many things, CPU efficiency, storage efficiency, network efficiency. It comes short with all of that, trying to manage objects of variable sizes. And that's the nature of real-time analytics. So we put all of that to work. Redis was an easy target. We worked with Redis as the company. They're very supportive of us. They have also a great presence in Israel, so we worked very closely with them. And so that's how it came together. And then we found out that use case beyond Redis, but like Redis. So not let's say not Redis Enterprise, but other solutions like Redis with really big customers that are desperately needing something like FlyOps to take better advantage of their infrastructure because they're overwhelmed with data, and has led us to be to the point that we are.
Yeah, like I say, it certainly, I'm sure from William's standpoint, helps reduce the cost of high-speed solutions. And we all know that DRAM is really expensive these days, and I think I've seen surveys that say it can be 50% or more of a server system's cost. So
right.
Certainly this gives you that kind of performance without that kind of cost, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, I think what especially in the Redis side, what we see with our customers is typically they get to a point where they can't actually put more RAM in the system, right? Like, yes, there's certainly a TCO problem. It's very expensive, right? But in a lot of times, they're willing to pay for it because Redis is transformational and accomplishing these real-time engagements is becoming so important, right? But they get to a point where they're like, okay, well, we did it for this application and that application because the data sets are small enough that we can like fit them in RAM and it makes sense, right? But the moment that they start to investigate other applications where they want to have these same types of experience, where the data sets are so large that they can't fit in RAM, they end up going back to like this Redis on Flash thing. That's why Redis on Flash exists, right? Because the Redis team was like, oh, wow, we need to address this problem, right? Both TCO and capacity. And they did, but at the direct expense of performance, right? And so the FlyOps team is finding ways to be more intelligent about the way that data is managed between the computational components and the storage components, and finding ways to be more intent-based on what they're going to do with that data so that they can provide a better experience to the application versus just using a common storage interface and just, writing it to disk from CPU and hoping that they can pick it back up and do whatever they need to do with it in a performant way. There are ways to ensure that the application is going to get the data it needs as fast as possible. But it takes a level of intelligence and hardware design, ASIC design that can perform these types of tasks that doesn't really exist in a standard computational footprint of CPU, RAM, Flash that we commonly engage with today. So, again, solving these hard problems from a PNAP perspective, solving these hard infrastructural problems opens the eyes of our customers and prospective customers to the core components of what we talked around about cost savings and anti-lock-in and things like that. We solve this one problem, and then they go, oh, okay, well, I'm here. I've got an application here. And why not take this other application that doesn't really need to run in public cloud because it's not, using whatever PaaS services is in vogue right now. It's literally just on some EC2 or Google VM or whatever. Why am I running it there 24/7? It doesn't make sense. And so we bring that over. So That's this whole story. And I think that Tony's doing the same thing with Redis, right? He's like, we solve this massive Redis problem. We engage with a customer, and then we show you, oh yeah, by the way, we also have done work with Mongo. We've done work with this other, platform, et cetera. And we have similar, maybe not as extreme, but similar outcomes that can be super transformative for customers. So very happy to work in Plaps, very happy to be engaging in solutions like this.
Excellent. Let's go to the third audience survey. And that is, when speeding up your applications, which part of the solution needs acceleration the most today? I'll go ahead and launch that, give you a couple minutes to fill that out. And we'll jump to the final question. And that would be, what have you seen as the most important lessons learned that you found from this engagement? I know we already addressed some of those. Is there anything else you want to throw in that you've seen as far as
I would say we're at the beginning of our journey, and so far so good. And we're very excited about Redis specifically because we think what we're going to offer with PhoenixNav is provides unique approach and place where a customer may not find it at the public cloud offerings. So we're looking forward to that, and we're excited because we think that you get much better storage out of this solution, much better priced and performing solution out of this versus what you get elsewhere.
Excellent. We got a couple of questions here from the audience. Let me read these out and I'll let you guys answer them as we go. We talked about data set size before, and that was an interesting point you made, William, that sometimes it's not just money, it's just you can't get there. How big of data sets have you seen built with this solution? Either ones you guys have done as tests or customers have actually used?
Yeah. Tony, why don't you start on what you guys have done?
Yeah, I think in general, we see people using, the best way I can answer this is the amount of SSDs putting, the capacity they're putting in. And for the customers we're dealing with so far, we're seeing anywhere north of 32, 50, 60 terabyte to start with. And then once they feel very comfortable with PlyOps, and it comes in stages, the second stage, all of a sudden they go to 6, 12, 16 terabyte type data set size. And I should say something else that is interesting. People are feeling even comfortable putting that in QLC SSDs, which is something that we do well with our solution. So I would say, and think of it like the limitations that you have with DRAM on that. So all of a sudden you go from a 700 gig system per node to 7 terabyte. So that's a big difference.
Yeah. I think on the RAM side, what we see is the cost of, there's a sweet spot for DRAM today in DDR4. DDR5 is out now. We have systems Sapphire Rapid systems that support that, Intel Xeon Scalable 4th generation, right? That support, DDR5. But let's just talk in the DDR4 ecosystem for right now. What we see is, most of these systems are still kind of capped out at around 3 TB per node of DRAM. And that is an ultra premium experience, right? Like that is, like you said earlier, 50+% of the server is RAM. I would say if you're maxing out a system with, call it 3 TB and maybe a 4-way socket with 6 TB DRAM system, you probably are closer to like 70% of the
sounds like Ferrari level cost.
Yeah, it's Ferrari stuff, man. And I think that so let's say the reasonable is like 1 terabyte is reasonable, and that's just not big enough for so many applications to run Redis.
I want to emphasize one more thing, which is one of the slides I showed. Even, no matter how big of a data set size you want to put into that node, the minute you're going to miss your latency SLA, it's useless, right?
Right.
So that is the key. That is why a solution like XDP on Redis and PNAP matters, because you can put the data set size that you want and not worry about missing your SLA. That is really the key takeaway.
That's a really good point. I mean, that's certainly, if you're adding costs and you're making your situation worse, it really doesn't help you out much. Well, one other question, that is, companies like AWS and Azure put a lot of energy into building custom cards to accelerate things, provide security, things like that. What do you see as the big difference between your solution and the ones they're doing as far as acceleration go?
Okay. I'll go first. And so I think some of the things that, for example, AWS does with their Nitro solution is similar to the things that we do and the way we essentially manage storage and how we shape the data by the time it hits the NAND. So similar in some ways, except that obviously they're very monetizing. They want to keep everything in their domain. So our solution, it provides all of that and more because we are, in a way, we are more flexible. We can turn things quicker because we are more agile than them in some ways, and make that available to great partners like Phoenix NAND.
And I'm sure that William will say avoiding customer lock-in with a specific cloud provider has got to be a big thing as well.
I mean, it's certainly a point. I mean, as it compares to, say, something like Nitro, the more direct comparison is the limited number of instances that have access to large amounts of on server disk, right? Instance types have a lot of, call it server resident disk. Which is highly preferable to like EBS attached disk, right? Like in these cases, that's not going to work for what this specific application. And so, that's a place where there's certainly a difference. That's not a Nitro, obviously limitation. That's just the way that they're architected and the type of instance types that they offer. But yeah, I mean, I think that, the fact that it's proprietary, that you have to use AWS to get access to Nitro. If what we're doing with Plyops, back to what I said earlier, you use our platform, you love it, you think it's the best thing ever, and you said, you know what, I like this experience, is great for my app, but I've decided, my security team's decided that I have to either do Microsoft Azure or on-prem. You can go execute that same thing in a data center with an HPE server. You can't do that with Nitro. So there you go.
That is very true.
There you go.
Well, thanks much, guys. I think this has been a great discussion. Again, for those of you in the audience, we are recording this. We'll provide a link to the recording as well as a PDF of the slide set within the next couple of days to everybody that registered. Thanks again, Tony and William. Great talking to you, and I hope everybody else has a great day out there. Thanks again.
Our pleasure.